Today, we are diving into an ancient philosophy that feels surprisingly, well, necessary for our modern world. We're talking about karma yoga, the art of selfless action, and how it might just be the key to dealing with stress and finding real purpose.
So let's start with a question that I think a lot of us wrestle with. Do you have to choose between having a meaningful, spiritual life and, succeeding in the real world, with jobs and families and all the responsibilities that come with them? Well, karma yoga has a pretty powerful answer to that. Nope, you absolutely do not.
All right, here's our game plan for today. First, we'll get into what the yoga of action even means. Then we'll unpack its biggest secret, this idea of desireless action. After that, we're going to get super practical with 5 principles you can actually use. We'll take a quick look at where this idea came from and finally bring it all into the present to see how it can really change things for us today.
So let's jump right in. The whole point of the yoga of action is to heal that split we often feel between our spiritual side and our everyday life. It's a path that says, hey, you don't need to run off to a mountaintop to find meaning. You can find it right here, in the middle of everything.
So what is it, really? Well, karma yoga is this incredible discipline where your actions, your job, your chores, all of it, become the actual path to spiritual freedom. It's about turning the ordinary into something extraordinary, using your daily life as a tool for your own growth.
And that leads us to the real secret sauce here. If any old action can be a spiritual practice, what makes it special? It all comes down to a huge shift in your focus, moving your attention away from the fruit of the action, the result or the reward, and putting it on the root, which is your intention and the action itself.
And at the very heart of this is a single, powerful concept, nishkama karma. It literally means desireless action. This is the practice of doing what you have to do with total excellence, with your full attention, but, and this is the key part, without being attached to the outcome. It doesn't matter if it brings you praise or money or if you even fail. You detach from the result.
You can really see it when you put the two approaches side by side. On the one hand, you have action with attachment. It's all about the results, which just feeds your ego and, let's be honest, leads to a ton of stress. You're basically a slave to the outcome. But then you have action without attachment. Here, the focus is on your duty, on the process itself, and that is where you find freedom. That's where real growth happens.
I love this analogy. Just picture a master craftsman at her bench. She isn't just clocking in for a paycheck. She is completely absorbed in the quality of her work moment by moment. The praise, the money, all that stuff is secondary. The action itself, the act of creation, becomes its own reward. She's basically dedicating her work to the ideal of craftsmanship itself, something bigger than her own personal gain.
Okay, this all sounds really good in theory, right? But how do you actually start doing this in your own life? Well, this next part is our practical toolkit, the how-to for putting it all into practice.
Think of this whole practice as being built on 5 pillars. It all starts with nishkama karma, that desireless action we've been talking about. That action is guided by kartavya, which is your personal sense of duty, what your role in the world asks of you. Then you make it selfless through tyaga, which is consciously letting go of your attachment to the results. You can go even deeper with ishwararpana, by seeing your work as an offering to something sacred. And all of this builds up to the ultimate goal, lokasangraha, acting for the good of the entire world.
And the psychological benefit of doing this? It's huge. You start to cultivate something called samatva, or equanimity. It's this profound sense of inner freedom, this emotional balance where you're just not thrown around by the highs of success or the lows of failure anymore.
Now, this might sound like some modern self-help idea, but it's actually an ancient philosophy with some seriously deep roots. So let's just quickly trace how this idea came to be.
The journey this idea took is pretty fascinating. It started way back in the Vedic period with these big external rituals that were done to get specific results. But then, in the Upanishadic era, something big shifted. The focus turned inward. It wasn't about the action anymore, but about the desire behind it. And all that thinking culminates in the Bhagavadgita, which just synthesizes it all brilliantly into the karma yoga we know today.
And here is the Gita's massive insight. It basically says, look, you can't just stop acting. It's impossible. And even if you could, that's not the goal. The real path, the real secret to freedom is to act fully and with everything you've got, but to let go of your attachment to what happens next.
Okay, so let's bring this ancient philosophy right into the here and now. How can we actually use karma yoga to find some real purpose in our modern, often chaotic daily grind?
At its core,
Karma Yoga just completely dissolves that false choice we started with. It's telling us that our worldly responsibilities, our careers, our families, our communities, these aren't getting in the way of our spiritual lives. No way. They are the very field where our spiritual life is meant to happen.
And the modern applications are just so practical. This isn't just some lofty theory. It's a blueprint for ethical leadership where a manager works for the good of the team, not just for personal glory. It's a foundation for a life of service. And maybe most importantly, it gives us a way to turn our daily work into a form of worship, which is an incredibly powerful antidote to the stress and burnout so many of us feel.
So if there's just one idea you take away from all this, let it be this one. Freedom isn't about escaping your life or your responsibilities. As the philosophy says, liberation is found not by running from action, but by making it sacred. You find freedom right where you are, by elevating what you do with selfless intention.
So I'll just leave you with this to think about. Your commute, those meetings, the endless emails, the deadlines. What would change? What would shift inside of you if you started to see all of that not as a grind, but as your primary spiritual practice?